To set up the game, place the board in the center of the area that you will be playing on. Then take the clock marker and place it on the 30 spot of the timer track. Take 2 of the magnets that come with the game and place them next to each of the scoreboards, as well as placing 1 magnet on each of the 3s of the time out tracks. Take the offense dice, which have the positive numbers, and the defense dice, which have the negative numbers and the flags, and set them aside for now. Take the penalty die and the kick die and place it on their appropriate space on the board. Take the football, the clock die, and the first down marker and basically just set them aside for now. They'll come into play later on. Finally, flip this coin and have one player call heads or tails on the coin. If that player calls it correctly, they get to decide whether they want to start with the possession of the ball in the first half or kick the ball away. The player who kicks the ball away will start with possession in the second half. One important thing to note is that the field on the board is actually divided into 4 separate columns. This is to actually help keep track of what down it is on the board, with the first column being first down, second down, etc. Anytime you start a new drive, or if you start a new set of downs, the ball will be placed on the leftmost column of the board. And after every time the ball is moved, move it to the right to indicate a new down. Once you have done everything I have previously stated, you are ready to begin. The game plays over the course of 2 halves. Each half begins with a kickoff, as well as after every scoring play. Whenever a kickoff happens, the kicking team decides whether they would like to do a regular kick or an onside kick. The kicking team can attempt an onside kick to recover the ball for themselves. To do this, place the ball on their 30-yard line. The red player will then roll their red die, the yellow die, and the clock die. Ignore any breakaways that occur, which I will get to breakaways later. You will then move the ball forward the total amount of yards that are on the 2 dice. If the total of the dice is 10 or more, and the clock die shows a T, not this clock, a T, which means turnover, then that means that the kick is successful. The kicking player then gets the ball with a first down wherever the ball landed. If the dice fail to come up to at least 10, or the clock die does not show the turnover symbol, then the onside kick has failed and the receiving team gets the ball wherever the ball landed. Alternatively, the kicking player can choose to just simply do a regular kick. If the kicking player does a regular kick, the receiving player can then choose to either have the ball start on their own 25-yard line, or they can choose to run the ball out. To run the ball out, roll all 3 dice and advance the ball that many total yards from their own goal line. In this example, I have rolled a combined total of 8, so I will move the ball 8 yards from my goal line. If while running the ball out, you manage to roll circles on the dice, then you can re-roll the circled dice until you get non-circled results. The combined total of all the dice that you've rolled, including the ones you have re-rolled, will then be used for running the ball out. Once the kickoff has been resolved, wherever the ball ends up, take the first down marker and place it so that one of the pillars on it is on the same yard line as the ball. Once the first down marker has been placed, the players on both sides will then start calling plays. To choose a play, each player will take one of the dice that they have, secretly choose one, and place it in their hand. The player who has the defense dice, which are the dice that have all of the negative values on them, will also take the clock die into their hand. Once both players have chosen the dice that they want, they will then simultaneously reveal them. If the dice that were chosen by the offensive player and the defensive player were different colors, the offensive player will roll their die, while the defensive player will just roll the clock die. Before I go any further, I need to talk about the clock die for a minute. There are 3 different faces that can appear on the clock die: a blank face, a turnover face, and the clock face. The clock die is always going to be rolled for every play, no matter what. If when you roll the clock die and a blank face comes up, nothing happens. If you roll the clock die and the clock face comes up, then move the clock marker one space forward on the time track. If you roll the clock die for a play and the turnover sign comes up, you will then roll the clock die again. If you rolled a blank side, nothing will happen. If you roll the clock face again, just move the time marker one space forward like before. If the turnover result, however, comes up again, then there is a turnover and the defensive player gets the ball. The ball is still, however, advanced the appropriate yards shown on the dice. The defensive player will then attempt to roll for a return depending on what colored die was used by the offensive player when the turnover occurred. For example, in the play that I showed earlier, the yellow die was the one that was rolled when the turnover occurred. If a turnover occurs when the yellow die was selected for the offensive player, the defensive player will then roll both of the red dice and move however many yards that the red die is showing on the offensive side back the number of spaces on the board. If the turnover occurred when the red die was selected, then there is no return. The ball is simply recovered wherever it currently is on the board. If the ball was turned over from a green die, the defensive player will then roll the two yellow dice and move the ball the amount of spaces shown on the offensive side of the yellow die. There's an important thing you need to keep in mind when it comes to returns. The number showing on the defensive die does not count toward the yardage for the return of the ball. It is only rolled to see if there is a penalty. I'll get to penalties a little bit later. If the dice that were revealed from the offense and defensive player were the same, then all of the dice that are showing will be rolled. The ball will then be moved forward or backwards according to the sum of both of the dice that were rolled, unless the defending player rolled a penalty flag, which again I will get to later. After every play occurs, the down marker, which is represented by the ball, will move. If the offensive player has not moved the ball to the first down marker, then the ball will then be moved over one column. If, however, the offensive player makes it to or past the first down marker, the down marker is moved back to the first column if it was on another column, or it remains on the first down column, depending on where the ball was when the first down was made. If the offensive player makes the first down, then take the first down marker and move it to where the back of it meets the same spot where the ball is. If the offensive player gets to the fourth down column and still has not made enough yards to reach the front of the first down marker, the offensive player is then given three options. They can either punt the ball away to the defender, they could go for it on fourth down by running a play as normal, or they could kick a field goal. I'll get to punting and kicking field goals a little bit later. If the offensive player wants to go for it on fourth down, both players will then select the die and reveal them and running a play just like normal. However, this time, if the roll does not result in the amount of yards that the offensive player needed to make the first down, then there is an immediate turnover on downs and you will move the first down marker to reflect the new direction of the ball. To move the first down marker, simply just take the marker and move it over to where the ball is currently at on the other side of the field to represent that now the opposing player now has possession. If the offensive player did go for it on fourth down and they actually managed to get the amount of yards that they needed, then the down marker is reset back to the first column and the yard marker will then be moved up to represent a new set of downs. Remember though, that is just one of the three things that the offensive player can do on fourth down. If the offensive player does not want to go for it on fourth down, they can then choose to either punt the ball away or kick a field goal. To punt the ball away, the defensive player will pick any two dice that they want and roll both of them. If the defending player rolled two flags, then the punt is blocked. If the punt gets blocked, you will then roll the clock die. If you roll the clock die when you block a punt and the turnover side comes up, then the defending player may run a return, which I will get to later. Now, if the defending player rolled 2 flags, but the turnover side did not come up on the clock die, then the offense recovers the blocked punt and may then roll both of their red dice. You then move the ball the combined number that is shown on the dice, and if the offense made a first down, they continue as usual. Otherwise, the defender gets possession of the ball wherever the ball ended up. If the punt was not blocked, then the offensive player will then roll the kick die along with any one offensive die that they choose. You will then move the ball that many yards forward according to the dice that you've rolled, ignoring breakaways. Any punt that goes into the opponent's end zone is ruled a touchback, and the ball will be placed at the opponent's 25-yard line, and the defense takes over the ball. Otherwise, the defense has 2 options. They can either call a fair catch, which means they just take the ball where it lands, or they can try to return the ball. To return the ball, the defense will then roll both yellow dice together, ignoring all of the yards shown on the negative die. Once again, the defense die is just being rolled to see if there was a penalty on the return. Breakaways, however, do still apply. The last thing the offensive player can do on 4th down is to attempt a field goal. One thing to note, however, is that an offensive player can attempt a field goal on any down that they'd like. If the offensive player wants to attempt a field goal, they will roll the kick die. If wherever the ball is currently on is lower or equal to whatever the kick die was rolled, then the field goal is good and the offense scores 3 points. Anytime points are scored, simply take one of the magnets and move it up the score track to whatever your current score is. If you ever had a score that gets above the single digits, simply take the other magnet, move it to whatever double digit that you have, and then simply move the first one down to wherever you have your other set. For example, if I were to have 21 points, then that would mean I would have this one magnet at 20 and the other magnet at 1 to represent 21. If I were to have 13 points, then I would have this one magnet at 10 and this other magnet at 3, and so on and so forth. One thing to know, however, is that field goal attempts that are on or within the 20-yard line, also known as the red zone, are not automatically good. If the offense rolls the kick die for a field goal on or within the 20-yard line and they ended up rolling a 20, they then must roll the die again. And if on the reroll they rolled a 20 again, the field goal is no good. However, before a field goal attempt is made, the defense can try to block the attempt by rolling 2 defense dice and rolling both as a flag. In this example, I did not roll both flags so that the block attempt is failed and the offensive player may attempt the field goal. If the field goal attempt was no good or if it was blocked, then the defense immediately takes over the ball. You will then switch dice to mark that the possession has changed, and then you will adjust the first down marker to note the new direction that the ball is going. If the offense manages to get the ball on or past the opponent's goal line, this is a touchdown and they score 6 points. They then have an opportunity to either kick an extra point or go for a 2-point conversion. To kick an extra point, take the clock die and the kick die and you will roll them. If the results were the turnover symbol and a 20 on the kick die, then the extra point is no good. Any other results that are rolled means the attempt was good. If you successfully manage to kick the extra point, you will score an extra point. If the offensive player attempts to go for a 2-point conversion, both players will then choose a die to roll as if you were trying a normal play. However, the defending player does not roll the clock die. And if the offensive player manages to get 2 yards or more, the 2-point conversion is successful and the offensive player scores 2 points. If the ball were to ever cross into the offensive player's end zone, this is known as a safety, and the defending player will score 2 points. The offensive player also immediately turns the ball over to the defense by punting the ball from their 20-yard line. The half ends immediately when the clock marker reaches the end of the clock track. When this happens, the player who started the first half with possession of the ball now gets to decide whether they will do a regular kick or an onside kick. If there were any timeouts that were used in the first half, they will then be reset to 3. The clock marker will then be moved back to 30, and then you will start the second half. Now those are all the basics, but there are several things you're going to need to know before you play your first game. Anytime the player on offense were to roll one of these values, the player has an open lane and continues to run, meaning that that player can then pick up that die, roll it again, and they can keep rolling until they get a result that is not of the circle. When you do this, advance the ball the total sum of the values that are rolled. For example, let's say I had picked the red die and I did end up rolling the 5. That would mean I moved the ball 5 yards, but because it was the highest value, I get to roll it again. I got it another time, so I moved the ball another 5 yards, and I get to roll it again. This time, however, I did not get a result that is surrounded by a circle, so I moved the ball forward the 4 yards that I had rolled, and that would be the end of the play. In another example, let's say I had picked the yellow die and I rolled a 10. I would then move the ball the 10 yards that I had rolled on the die, and then I would get to roll it again. This time I had rolled a 6, so I moved the ball 6 yards, and that is the end of the play. If the offensive player chooses the red die and the defensive player does not, it is possible for the runner to break a tackle and keep running, and that is what the square 2 is for. This is known as a broken tackle. If when you roll the red die, when the defensive player doesn't pick the red die, and you roll the red 2 on the first roll, and only on the first roll, a broken tackle occurs. Once again, you will re-roll the die and add to it until you get a non-breakaway result. Any further broken tackle rolls, like I just did here, do not let you roll it again. This would mean that I would simply add the 2 plus the 2 that I had rolled for the re-roll, which would be 4, and then move the ball forward that many yards, and then that would be the end of the play. Had I rolled a breakaway, however, after I had rolled the broken tackle, I would be allowed to roll the die again and keep rolling it until I had gotten a non-breakaway result. If the offensive player had successfully managed to pick the green die, meaning they picked the green die but the defending player did not, then the offensive player may decide to instead throw a long bomb before rolling their die. To do this, take the yellow die, the kick die, and the green die and roll them all at once. You will then subtract the result of the yellow die from the sum of the green and kick die. You will then move the ball that much distance down the field unless you roll a 0 on the yellow or green die. If you rolled a 0 on the yellow or green die, like I just did here, then it is considered an incomplete pass and you automatically lose the down and any yardage that you would have gained on that play. If you rolled a 0 on both the yellow and the green die, then you have thrown an interception. The defender will roll for a return by rolling both of the green dice. When the defensive player rolls for a return, breakaways will still apply. Anytime the defensive player rolls the penalty flag, you will then roll the penalty die. If the side shows an O, that means it's an offensive penalty, whereas a D is a defensive penalty. Whichever side ends up showing on the die, the opposing side gets to decide whether to accept or decline the penalty. For example, this means that the penalty was on the offense, so the defensive player gets to decide whether to accept or decline the penalty. If the penalty is accepted, all of the die results for the play are ignored. You will then move the ball the appropriate amount of yardage showing on the die, in this case, an offensive penalty of 5 yards, so the ball will move back 5 yards. When you do this, do not move the down marker. Instead, the down is repeated. There is a special case for this result. This is a defensive holding. If the offensive player accepts this penalty, the ball will be moved 5 yards and it will automatically create a new set of downs. If the penalty, however, is denied, simply then move the ball per the die results. An important thing to note is that if a defensive penalty would end up resulting in the ball crossing the goal line, the penalty is then changed to being half of the distance to the goal. When that happens, simply move the ball half of the distance toward the goal line. There's another important thing to note regarding this penalty here. This means offensive holding, which would normally move the ball back 10 yards and repeat a down. However, if this penalty would result in the ball crossing the offense's goal line, the defending player scores a safety. Remember when I said that the 20 yards and further on is considered the red zone? Well, there's a special rule if you were to use the green die within the red zone. If the offensive player uses the green die in the red zone and the total amount of yards that are gained exceeds the goal line by more than 2 yards, then it is an automatic incomplete pass and the offensive player loses a down. The offensive player can attempt a Hail Mary pass as the absolute last play of the half. To do this, they have to be either on or past their own 35-yard line. Second, the clock marker must be on the 2-minute space, and they must have no timeouts left. If you have all three of those, you can attempt a Hail Mary. To do this, roll the yellow and green dice. If both of the dice end up rolling their breakaway results, then it is successful and you will score a touchdown. If you roll any other result, the Hail Mary has failed and the half is over. When an offensive player successfully runs the red die, meaning that they picked the red die but the defensive player did not, they can then run out the clock. Whenever they complete the play, they may then advance the clock marker 1 space, regardless of whether or not they rolled the clock on the clock die, as long as the clock is not on the final 2-minute space. Each player has 3 timeouts. What these are for is that any time that the clock was going to move forward, either player can spend a timeout to stop the clock from moving forward to the next space. To do this, simply move your magnet to the next spot to show how many timeouts you have left. Once that marker reaches 0, you can no longer stop the movement of the clock for the rest of the half. The game ends immediately when the clock marker reaches the last space of the clock track in the second half. When that happens, whoever has the most points is the winner. If the game ends and the players are tied, the players can then choose to continue the game by playing overtime. To do this, randomly determine a player to receive or kick, just like at the start of the game, and play will proceed as normal, and whoever scores first wins. And that is everything you need to know in order to play First and Roll. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you want to know my thoughts on First and Roll, or if you want to learn how to play more games, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more tutorials, reviews, and unboxings. Thank you all as always so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.